Well, I'm Bill O'Neill, and I've lived in Red Hook since I was born here on May 16th, 1938. Very proud of that fact. My family had moved to Red Hook in 1934 and bought what was known as the Crockwell Farm, just north of the village, behind what's currently the Elks Club on Route 9. It was at that time known as Peter's Inn. And there was a nice farm there, maybe a couple hundred acres, a fruit farm, a couple of barns. And so my father, actually, John O'Neill, I think was one of the early commuters. I mean, you take in 1934, he would take the train, the old locomotive from Barrytown Station to New York, Brooklyn, and he would work then in Brooklyn from Monday through Friday and then take the train home on Friday night. So he commuted to his job. He was a lithographer, a union pressman in Brooklyn. And my mother, who was a young art student, ran the farm with a fellow named Fred Minkler, who was an old Red Hook native. And so they ran the farm. I was born there in 1938, my brother in 1934, my sister later on. But we lived on that farm until the war years, I think around 43 or so. The barn at one time, the house at one time burned down, I think in the winter of 1939 or 40. And there was a little bit of lore around the Red Hook area where my father had hard cider in the cellar. Now, you remember in those late 30s, most farmers up here, they'd have a little bit of hard liquor around, and so anyway, after the fire, the firemen supposedly all celebrated with this hard cider, and everybody left happy. But we rebuilt the house, the farmhouse, and continued to live there until probably 1942, 43. Then we moved into the village of Red Hook. So I then was raised in the village of Red Hook in my early years. We moved again out to by the golf course on 199 for a few years, but then came back to the village. So most of my roots have been in the village of Red Hook. My mother, again, she had the three children. She was an art student. She studied at Bard College early on, and then she became an art teacher at Red Hook schools. So in 1938, when the Red Hook High School opened there in Linden, what we call today the Linden Avenue School, my brother was the first class as a kindergarten class to go through there. My mother taught then art at the Red Hook for a few years, and she was active locally in many things. She was president of the PTA for some years and stuff. So. Again, the great years, I think, as I look back on my life, were the first years of growing up in the school system in Red Hook. We would walk to school. We had great teachers. In those days, my parents would give them a bottle of whiskey for Christmas, and nobody thought worse of it. There were a great number, as we all know, after World War II, of tremendous men and women who, after the war, would come to Red Hook, to relocate to the Red Hook area as teachers. And they had great experience, they had great character, and I think that was one of the aspects of the Red Hook schools in those years, in the late 40s and early 50s, where you had real men and women running the show and kind of showing you some discipline, some self-discipline. And the classes were small. My father, in the early 40s then, got a job when Western Printing and Lithographing opened in Poughkeepsie. So it had been the old Peugeot or something, a Renault factory. Remember, a Renault automobile factory across from what's now Marist College. Western Printing and Lithographing came from Racine, Wisconsin, opened up a factory there. So he was able to move from his job in Brooklyn to Poughkeepsie. So then he commuted from Red Hook to Poughkeepsie back and forth in those early years. And so that was much better. But again, we moved into the village. We had sold the farm. And my mother continued to work in the schools. She went into real estate for a while. My brother graduated from Red Hook schools in 1952. I graduated in 1956. I think because of the influence of my mother and her Bard College gang, my brother went to Brown University, which was kind of unusual in the early 50s, go to an Ivy League school like that. And then I followed in 1956 to go to Brown also. And my sister then had been born 4 years after me, and she went up to Elmira College for a while. So we all, left town and went to college. My father unfortunately died early in 1957. And my mother then, as a widow, with huge, integrity and imagination and endurance, I guess you would say. But she developed into a real estate person. She bought and sold some properties in Red Hook, which she would buy and then fix up and sell, that sort of thing. And then she got a job as a secretary to two presidents at Bard College, which was really the highlight of her life. She respected and admired the community at Bard College. Reamer Klein and Jim Case were the two presidents she worked for as secretary. And those were wonderful years. Now, during those years, I was growing up in the high school, so I'd have to go over there for piano lessons and stuff like that with Mrs. Fraunfelder and people on the faculty. We interacted with a lot of the faculty families in those days. So Bard was a huge influence on all of us. And after college, as I said, I graduated from Brown in 1960. Then I went to law school at Duke Law School in Durham.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Before we get into the college and the transition.
Yeah.
You were in the class of '56.
Right.
Yep. You guys and gals were a special class.
Well, I remember in those days there was always kind of a feeling that not every class coming out of Red Hook Central School was a special class. But the class of '56 had a group of young people whose families had really established, the town of Red Hook for a number of years. It was Phil Rockefeller, the Rockefellers of Upper Red Hook, and Woody Close and the Closes of Echo Valley Road. Gail Quinn and Fred Quinn, who helped build, developments around Red Hook and water systems. Judy Warius, whose father was a huge IBMer and then had a family in Poughkeepsie. His brother had been mayor of Poughkeepsie at one point. Joe Josefowitz, who had come to America after World War II as what used to be called a displaced person, but he was hardly a displaced person. He was a huge success at Red Hook schools, and as we all know, later came back and taught at Red Hook as a career. Janice Klum, who was the daughter of a renowned farm family, the Klum family. Still, you can see their name on the farms north of the village of Red Hook. And people like that, Ronnie Unson, Glenn Kilgore, people whose families have been born and raised in the Red Hook area. And they combined, I think in this class of '56, a lot of intellectual talent. There were some smart people, and then great athletes. So the class itself, and I can tell you that just the other day we had a meeting of the Red Hook Alumni Association. There was like 7 or 8 people who showed up on a snowy, cold night. And we looked around and 3 of us were from the class of '56. So after all these years, the class of '56 is still, making it, hopefully trying to do something to benefit, the local community. But that was a great class. I would puff up about that.
What was your personal highlight of the class of '56? What do you remember most?
Well, I think, as kids, you remember the athletic achievements, the basketball team that won a couple of championships and the football team that was undefeated for a couple of years. We never did that well in baseball or track or anything but football and basketball. And we had people, you think of Marjorie Campbell, who at one point was crowned the cherry pie baking queen of America, I think, by one of the food, conglomerates in the Midwest. And I remember I was a member of the band in Red Hook High School. We had a really good band. And she came home to Barrytown by one of those old steam locomotives. And when I say we, the community went to the Barrytown Railroad Station. We had the band there. And here comes Marjorie Campbell and their big celebration. And so, there were events like that. I mean, you could mention the minstrel shows, which, when you look back, I suppose historically, were the creation, of a state of mind that existed at that time, which is no longer appropriate. But those were, events that occurred at the high school that did involve, the whole community, and they were very well done. They were hilarious at Christmas shows, and people who could sing, who were well regarded throughout the community. So I don't know of any particular real highlight. I mean, unless it would be the senior trip to Washington, D.C. was always a big thing. I think in your senior year we'd go to Washington, D.C., but it was just a generally, wonderful experience, a camaraderie with everybody. When I look back on it, you want to say, was there a class distinction? Was there, an elitism evident in the Red Hook school systems in the 1950s? And I would say no, that it was not at all a sense of to whom you were born or what your parents did for a living, something like that. That we all treated each other, I think, in a really equal vein. And so, it was a great experience. And then the college experience, of course, was good. But then I went to law school, and in '63 I graduated. So I was on the same page with Richard Nixon in the the graduate book from Duke Law School. But Nixon was not that well regarded in 1963 when I got out. But it was a good experience, and I went then into the FBI as a special agent because I just wanted to do something other than study, and I wanted to get down and do something practical, and law enforcement at the federal level seemed to be a great idea. So I was recruited to join the FBI while I was in law school, and I served then 8 years, which were good, in Illinois and North Carolina as a special agent with the FBI, and just general work. In those days, from 1963 to 71, was pretty much the height of the civil rights era, when much was happening in the world of civil rights. And the FBI was really, one of the few agencies that was out there trying to make a difference with the way some of the, the racial influences were coming to bear on the black community. So that was a good experience. Worked a lot of cases. And then in 1971, I wanted to come back to Red Hook, return to the Hudson Valley. Again, I'd been around, but there was never any place that I thought was more beautiful than crossing the river. Of course, by then the bridge had been built over to Kingston. But I mean, to see the Hudson Valley and to, the local community. The proximity to New York City was huge. Once you're a Yankee fan, are you always a Yankee fan, a Ranger, the Giants, the Knicks. And the draw of this location was huge. So I came back with my family. At that time I was married and had 3 children. So they started in the Red Hook schools, and they've all graduated since then and become, successful in their own rights. So when I came back to Red Hook in 1971, I got a job with Al Rosenblatt as an assistant district attorney in the Dutchess County DA's office. He was the first, a couple of us were the first full-time assistant DAs. And it was kind of fun because at the time I came back in the summer of '71, I ran into Woody Close, who also had, become a lawyer from Cornell, and Doug Wicks, who had just gotten out of the Air Force. He was a lawyer from, I'm not sure where he went to law school. But anyway, here's the 3 of us, 3 young buckaroo lawyers, knocking on Bill Walsh's door, who Bill Walsh was like the Mr. Lawyer in the village of Red Hook at the time. And so, he couldn't put us all to work. And he eventually hired Doug Wicks, who's been a whole story unto himself. He's still working there at the law firm in Red Hook. And then Woody went on to his own career, which we know was so successful. And I got a job with Al Rosenblatt as an assistant DA. So I stayed in that job then for 32 years. And for a while, I lived in Red Hook, on and off then, and permanently relocated, came back here in 1979. But all during that time, then I picked up this commute, I guess, like my father had, driving from Red Hook Village to Poughkeepsie, and then retired eventually from the DA's office, and then I went to work with a law firm for 10 years as a private attorney, and then I finally retired in 2012, and now I'm hopefully retired as an attorney and living in Red Hook. And then along the way, I got elected to the town board in the town of Red Hook. I had chosen, after I retired from government service, to get involved in local government in the local community when Mary Rose Blum Bump was the supervisor. And I had a granddaughter who called her my favorite aunt because my son had married Mary Rose's youngest sister. So we were connected by relationship, related in that way by marriage. So I started to work in the town with the working group for conservation and land development in 2004, and then that turned into the intermunicipal task force, and I've been on that ever since. And I was deputy supervisor for Mary Rose for a few years, and then I was elected as a town board member, and I've been now in my second term of the town board. So my activity now is pretty much with working with the town and the community and in the political world.
You first ran for election in 2009, I believe, in the election of 2009.
Let me
Yeah.
have you hold that for a sec.
Mhm, sure.
Try to keep your feet still to hear
Oh, okay.
the bouncing. You were away, but you were deeply involved in government and governance at the county level, and you always had your eye on Red Hook. Your heart was here all the time. And in 2009, when you were first running for election as town board, you said, and I quote, "Land use and planning for future growth is the priority issue for Red Hook."
Right.
I'd like you to say that was your motivation to get into what you've been doing now for countless thousands of hours later.
Right.
So
Yeah.
tell me in those words that was the reason.
Well, when I began to get involved with the town government, when Mary Rose Blum Bump was the supervisor, and Sue Crane was talking to me as an old school chum about getting involved in volunteer work in the town, I wasn't interested in historic preservation like many of you are. I wasn't interested in maintenance of highways and stuff like that. My concern really was in maintaining the rural character of the town. At that time, I didn't know that much. I hadn't studied the comprehensive plan of 1993 or whatever, or the open space plan of 2000. But, talking with Woody Close and Al Trezza, guys, who've been here for years and had been working with the town government, I picked up on the idea that there had to be some work done on holding the line on development and on requiring intelligent, conservative land use policies for the town of Red Hook. Otherwise, we'd get gobbled up like so many other areas. And so my work with Mary Rose, who was also similarly inclined, by the way, my work was to pretty much, emphasize the land use and development issues in the town of Red Hook. And that's really what I've focused on ever since.
I think it's 12 times. An hour early. This is 97, I think, 96 or 7. So we're trying to get him to talk about Tivoli.
Yeah.
But it's really, that's exactly right on. And this is very important for the continuing debate for what happens to this.
Mm-hmm.
This is the stuff you've been talking about for years and been involved. It's the issue of how do we put teeth in that. I think, how do you put teeth now in the law? Because we've got, the centers and green spaces, but, what do we do? Okay, so let's just back up a little bit and tell me again about, that's your motivation.
Well, so I was principally interested then in this concept of land use and development. Now, you understand, my family farm, behind the Elks Club on Route 9, from the time that I moved to the village of Red Hook and came back after government service, had become a development. I mean, it was, Grandmore Estates, and the farm was no longer. So I thought to myself, that's the kind of thing that I really want to listen to people who care about not wanting to have that happen if they can throughout the town. And there were many conversations with people who were suggesting that it was happening or without some control. So my sister Claire was an advocate for any kind of an issue in the town of Red Hook that would preserve the rural nature. She fought Hannaford, she fought the Pizza Hut, all that sort of thing. But I couldn't become an activist in that because I was working for the Dutchess County District Attorney's Office as a government employee. So I was limited. But once I started in 2004 with the Intermunicipal Task Force, which I would tout as one of the really good think tanks or some type of a task force of community people from all three municipalities that have been meeting almost weekly for over 10 years and discussing, how to hold the line on development and how to create zoning to fit the vision that was dictated in our comprehensive plan 1990, 1993, and the open space plan in 2000. So there's no question in the town of Red Hook that our forefathers, men and women who ran farms and ran businesses for years and years, had always felt that the rural character should be maintained and development should be in and adjacent to the villages where the development already exists, but to preserve the farmland. And of course, other people would say, well, we want to preserve a lot of the forest and farmland because of the turtles or because of some bat, that sort of thing. So, I mean, we merged with environmental groups in those early years to say that we all had the same goal, was to preserve the character, the natural habitat, the resources of the town. And in our comprehensive plan, of course, the resources are not only the agricultural fields and the view sheds and the forest, but also the historic structures. So now it began also to focus on the preservation of historic resources in the town of Red Hook. Now this, again, is something which is ongoing and principally being focused on now, but it's very, very important, as well as this idea of keeping a rural character means preserving our historical resources. So everybody who's involved in this task force have spoken in terms of creating zoning and legislation to address that. In 2011, we were able finally to create the Centers and Green Spaces Plan, which was approved by the county and the state and applauded by Scenic Hudson and Dutchess Land Conservancy, a lot of organizations who really know what's happening in other communities with respect to preservation of farmland and natural resources. And they've applauded the town of Red Hook for creating that Centers of Green Space Plan, which, as you know, does restrict certain development on farmland and open spaces in the town and limits the number of, the density, the number of homes, and focuses density in and adjacent to the villages. And as we all know, it becomes a matter of money as you go through the years. As any of us, I don't know how important money was in 1938 to me, but in this year, it's always a focus about money. So most of these programs that have been promoted in the past 10 years deal with the idea of limiting the amount of tax dollars that are going to have to be spent to accomplish these goals. The Community Preservation Fund was a huge success a few years ago that was created by, again, some forward-thinking people in the town of Red Hook who really took the time and made the effort to promote a community preservation fund. This is that fund that taxes 2% of the price over the median sale price of a home in the town of Red Hook. So if you sell a house in the town of Red Hook and it's over the median price for the county, then 2% of that difference comes back to the town in a fund which is used to buy development rights, purchase development rights from farmers. Because the concept is you want to preserve the rural character, but at the same time everybody has a right to their equity in their property. You can't take somebody's value out of their property. So this is a way of giving it back. And matter of fact, I think we have benefited hugely the farming community and landowners in the town of Red Hook. At the same time, we have not had to tax the taxpayer. We could go on, there had been a bond, as you know, some years ago that was used up, but now with this Community Preservation Fund, we do have a fund that can be used to purchase the development rights, and that has happened. So it's been a nice, collaboration among different entities, the land conservancies. The county government has helped a great deal, the state government. And then the town, puts in our share, but we've been able to preserve the lands, as you know, West Curly Corners Road, Echo Valley, the Kosecki Farms down along the Middle Road, Kalina's Farm, off Rokeby. So, I mean, a lot of really good farmland has been protected. And so we're on the way, but it's definitely not over. We have to still work to make sure we preserve as much as we can, and also then to turn our attention to the historic resources to preserve and protect those also.
What's the biggest challenge or challenges that you see that oppose this intelligent and community-wide acceptance of a smart plan for growth?
Well, I think the first one, of course, is the...
Again, the biggest challenges to
Oh,
this.
yeah. Well, the biggest challenge, I think, to a forward-looking approach to land conservation and development in the town of Red Hook is that a landowner who invests in his property has, of course, an interest in protecting his investment. So he's not only, or she's not only looking for a return on their investment, the equity in their property, but also what happens to it when it's passed on to their next generation, which of course is a concern for any person who's in planning, because you can't expect the next generation to have the same mentality and appreciation for local character as the current generation. But so the landowners want to ensure that their value is protected. And we have worked with them to do that, to create potential developments of land, what they can and can't do. And we try then to convince the landowners that, again, in the money world, in the practical world, it's not just a matter of saying, well, I want my child to be able to have 10 houses built on this land, because you have to say, what's it going to cost that next generation to have these houses built? And what are they going to get out of it? Versus if they sell their development rights now, they get the value of the property, they can still use the property for farming. So it's a win-win on both sides. So it's a matter of education, educating the landowners as to the value of these programs that we espouse. Now, maybe there have been some landowners who've changed their minds, by the way, so that some planners may say, well, they want to have 10-acre minimum zoning or 20-acre, but then you have to listen to the landowners to find out why they would say, no, it should be a larger amount or lesser amount. But that, I think, is the continuing dilemma that all communities have. In our community of Red Hook, I would say the difference is that we didn't just speak about it, we took action. And that would be the Community Preservation Fund and the Centers and Green Space Plan. Those two pieces of legislation, I think, distinguish the town of Red Hook from a lot of other communities in our area. And, I don't want to name them, but I mean, they're in Dutchess County, who are unable to have a fund to buy development rights, who have to rely upon individual grants that are obtained from time to time. They don't have an overall plan. And, the concept is that every community pretty much in the state has had to have a comprehensive plan, or they used to call it a master plan, and it would lay out your visions. But what's happened over the years is they've never been implemented in a lot of these communities. People have just not gotten it done. And I think that's where Red Hook has been applauded by many of the groups, because we have gotten it done.
But at what, this has not been a cakewalk for you people who led this fight. And what we're talking about here is yes, it's nice to have comprehensive plans and centers and green spaces, but there were some knockdown, drag-out fights. How did you manage? how did the relationships get managed here in Red Hook and not in Hyde Park or not in Hopewell Junction, which I drove through the other day, which is just ghastly from what's happened down there. In which, thank God, somehow you were, what makes you, how did you have this unique outcome in Red Hook? Because when it gets down to it, nobody tells me what to do with my land, you know, and we're gonna take your land. That's, you know, that's, and you were right in the thick of it.
Well,
Okay.
Seth?
Hey, Seth?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Turn off the heat, will you?
I did.
Oh, you did?
It just takes a while to run down.
Okay. That's all right. It picks up the air handling. It ticks and comes into the, so it overrides you, unfortunately. This is great. This is exactly what we need. This is conversation with you about this very important issue. So did you ever get in a sticky situation as an FBI agent?
well, I got shot at.
Oh, that's about as sticky as it gets.
The only thing I ever shot was a dog actually coming at me, coming out of the cellar. I killed the son of a bitch. Right? But you know, I was in the Hoover days. In the Hoover days, you weren't supposed to draw your gun unless you're supposed to, you know, but we did anyway.
The dog was coming out.
Some dark cellar. Oh.
God, it must have scared you,
But the other time was another agent, Guy Soden. He put a bullet right above my head. We were chasing some guy in a carjacking case. And he said it went off by mistake, but I don't know. They would have called it friendly fire, I guess.
Oh, jeez. Civil rights, 63 to 71.
They were very
Vietnam.
sad, very sad. Well, see, I got caught up. I remember having this conversation with your brother, probably. But, well, anyway, so you put it back on. When I think about how we were able to be successful, perhaps, in the town of Red Hook, as opposed to some other communities, this process for the past 10 years to create zoning legislation to limit development has been a process that has reached out for so many different entities in the town. And I think the key is that we've been able to get people to join in the discussion. The economic aspect was huge, to have people who could explain the dollars and cents of developing a parcel of farmland into houses as opposed to leaving it farmland, buying the development rights and continuing to farm it. Other agencies got involved, like Scenic Hudson, Dutchess Lane Conservancy, with people who you know, described the need down the road. In other words, created a bigger vision for feeding the population 100 years from now, when you have this great farmland, like in the Hudson Valley, like in the town of Red Hook, that where else are you going to grow crops to feed the population? And this started to make sense. I think that we gathered the farmers themselves. In the beginning, there were huge arguments, and we had public hearings with people barking back and forth about it. But the farmers themselves began, I believe, to think in terms a little bit higher than just passing it on to their children. They realized that they could guarantee something for the next generation, but it would be a little bit different from just putting up trailer parks, you know, in a beautiful cornfield. So I would like to think that it's more people in the town of Red Hook got involved. The academic world, Bard College, you know, a lot of people live in our community who are connected to a place like Bard College or Marist or Vassar. And, you know, they may have a level of intelligence a little bit beyond what some have in the community. And these people are able to articulate and research issues and come to the assistance of people like myself who try to explain to people, you know, in a limited way, maybe what they should, how they should think, or what would be best for them. So I think it was just a lot of work and a lot of effort with a lot of people. The only thing I can suggest, if any young people watch these shows and they say about local government, how does it work? I don't think there's anything that replaces a continuous effort. You know, you think I've always read Civil War stuff. I love military things, and I'm sure a lot of people do. But I mean, one of the concepts of some successful military campaigns is that you have to keep going forward. You can't sit back and wait. And the same thing in local endeavors, you know, like to change zoning, to limit development. You have to meet, again, this task force meets every week. So, I mean, you have to keep at it. You can't say, well, we're not going to meet this month or twice a month. You have to keep it in your forefront and just keep, you know, outweight everybody and keep it going until it happens. And believe me, it will happen, I think. In an intelligent community, Red Hook is very farsighted. And I think it will happen, and then people will be happy. This Community Preservation Fund, if you remember, when that was passed, there was huge fighting. There were some people that I had grown up with in Red Hook wouldn't speak to me afterwards. And there were big signs, you know, with red things, you know, no taxes there. They all looked at it as an illegal tax. And now, as successful as it's been, now kind of everybody wants to take credit for it. So it just goes to show how, if you persevere, and you don't back off, and you keep your focus, that it will get done. That, I think, is the lesson to learn from this Red Hook experience with Centers for Green Space and Community Preservation Act.
When I come back in 50 years, here's the Red Hook I see.
When I come back in 50 years, I don't know whether any of my children will still be living here. I think I still will have some relative, you know, some of the next generation living here. I think what I'm going to see, hopefully, is the same vistas, the same ridges. We have a little bit of problem with our ridge laws in the town of Red Hook. We have to adjust that. Some people, you know, are going to be asked to have their homes kind of fit more into the landscape than maybe they do. But generally speaking, I think we will see the farmland protected, the vistas, the scenic corridors, which have been mentioned, and the Red Hook school system maintained at a very high level as it is now. The community, what would be the population? Pretty hard to predict, but at least I don't believe we'll be overpopulated. Hopefully, there will be employments, you know, for everybody, everybody, and that farming, I believe, is going to change. I mean, I've already seen or heard, as limited as I am, that this concept of farming is changing into the concept of organic farming, being market-driven by the New York City population. That people may be able to raise crops or animals in a different kind of way, maybe with less land. But surely land is going to be needed. Forests are going to be needed. You would hope there's always going to be hunting available in the town of Red Hook. I mean, there are hunters born and raised in Red Hook generation after generation who deserve to go into the fields and the woods and hunt deer or turkeys or whatever. And people have to respect that almost. They have to know that you don't want to do anything to change that if you can. So I think that mentality, hopefully 50 years from now, will be preserved. What it's going to be like 100 years, I don't know, but people are going to have to still be very vigilant, because the economy and people who want to take advantage of a community like Red Hook, be very careful of them, because they're out there, and by golly, if you're not careful, I mean, the thing about some old Red Hook farmers, you know, you think of farmers, you know, in recent generations, they're very smart and very clever, and people always admired that kind of farming instinct to, you know, have to listen again and be sure of something, and we don't want to lose that. And I think that's the kind of thing. Those are the kind of men and women who created our comprehensive plans back in the 90s. So, I mean, I think it's important that we maintain that vision.